Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the Future of Work, Driving Manager Effectiveness During COVID-19. My name is Stephen Huerta, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Workify, an all-in-one employee feedback platform. Today is the third episode of a four-part series on the topic of the future of work. We have a great discussion lined up and a growing area of focus for our clients, helping managers and leaders be more effective in the new working environment. The first two episodes, we focus on the fundamental changes that we were seeing in the workplace, and they were pretty sweeping. Today, we're going to shift gears a bit. We're going to look at the tough job of being a people manager during COVID-19. Managing teams is difficult enough when it's business as usual. So when COVID-19 changed the way we work, it felt like we literally got the rug pulled out from underneath us. Not only have we had to work through our own personal challenges, like getting used to new tools and apps, or being quarantined with kids, but there have also been external changes in the world that have resulted in a need to focus on some more of the soft aspects of being the boss. Things like empathy, compassion, patience are needed more than ever to keep employees motivated and engaged in their jobs. Today's discussion, we've got two HR executives that are amazing people, and they're going to share the things that they are doing to help better equip and support managers, and we'll discuss how you can do this in an intentional way. I'm going to introduce them shortly. First, I want to take a look at our discussion topics. As usual, I like to start with numbers, and today I'm going to look at two factors that have impacted our society, and I believe these two things have really complicated the job of managers. First, let's look at mental health in this country. Data supports that we're truly in the midst of a crisis here. Stay-at-home orders, COVID-19 have resulted in some pretty eye-opening numbers. Nearly half of Americans are reporting a mental health impact. That's half of Americans. That means managers, employees, etc. There's been an 1,000% increase in calls, and that's not a typo, guys. 1,000% increase in calls to the federal hotline for emotional distress. In the therapy app, Talkspace has reported a 65% jump in clients since February. That's staggering. Given these numbers, it's safe to say that generally, managers are dealing with their own issues, and they're managing teams that are experiencing their own wellness realities. Second, let's take a quick look at the impact of homeschooling. This is something that absolutely impacted me. Of all of the children in schools in America, 96% of kids were affected by school closures this past spring. For parenting couples, there's been a clear impact on work-life balance. 28% of females, 19% of males are feeling as though they've had to work less. And lastly, a recent poll has showed that 60% of parents are expecting to homeschool again through next year. And that, considering that with plans for upcoming school year still being finalized, my guess is that number is probably going to jump in the next couple of weeks. So we've got personal issues, we've got team health issues on the rise. We're juggling crowded households. It's safe to say that these two dimensions alone have had a big impact on what it means to be a manager. So the question is, how do we work through these changes and equip managerial ranks, to deal with these issues and maintain high levels of performance? What's at stake for companies in getting this right? How do we get feedback in a way that's scalable and not disruptive to managers and employees? Who's struggling and who's thriving? How can we support those managers and individuals, regardless of where they are in this process? And that's really the key theme for today, is support. How can we support people? And our hypothesis is that if you provide more support from the top down, there's going to be a cascading effect through the organization. So we're really looking forward to this conversation today. Quick reminder that my colleague Amelia will be monitoring our chat line, so please remember to submit questions for our amazing guests today. As usual, we're going to spend about 40 minutes on the discussion. We're going to keep 20 minutes set aside for Q&A, so please hit us up with all your questions. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the guests. Joining us for this third fireside chat, we've got Carol Howard, Chief People Officer at Abrigo. Carol joined Abrigo in 2018, bringing more than 20 years of experience in human resources at a variety of different technology firms where she's fostered great company cultures. Most recently, Carol was the Senior Vice President of HR at the social media marketing software company Spreadfast, now Khoros. Carol has an MBA and Master's in Organizational Leadership and Ethics from St. Edward's University. Carol, welcome to our discussion today.
Thank you.
Next up, we also have David Galindo, Senior Manager of Learning and Development at Abrigo. David joined Abrigo in 2019. He also brings more than 20 years of experience in learning and development. In his role as Senior Manager, he has a focus on developing strengths-focused learning programs, and he's done that at a variety of software companies, including Spreadfest, Bazaar Voice, as well as GoDaddy in Phoenix, Arizona. David, welcome to our discussion as well.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So today we have two phenomenal HR executives that I know very well. In full disclosure, Abrigo is a client of Workify. We may be mentioned only in the small context of the very small role that we've played in Abrigo and Carol and David developing these amazing programs for their managers. But I did want to call that out. I'm thrilled to have David and Carol. I know them personally and professionally, and I have a ton of respect for them as practitioners and as human beings. So I'm really looking forward to a conversation on a topic that's dear to all of us. So welcome, Carol and David. How have you guys been?
We've been doing good.
Great. Thank you so much for having us today. Super excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, Carol, I like to start these sessions by giving our audience a context of your business that will help just everyone understand I guess the bigger picture. So do you mind giving us an overview of Abrigo's business?
Sure, yeah. Our mission is to help community banks and credit unions by providing them a technology to mitigate their risk and really grow. So anything from financial crimes to lending and credit, liability, and now recently with the PPP program, the SBA loans, it's something we've been doing as well.
Excellent, excellent. And David, what is your reaction to these statistics I shared? Like, does anything in particular stand out to you? These are pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, I agree. I think those numbers are really sobering, actually, and I do think they ring true. As you're reading through that, I was thinking, it's probably safe to say that we all know someone around us, close to us, that's experiencing those issues that you described in those statistics, and I think about that and how we can. One of my focus is how do we support the people around us that may be dealing with those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the topic today, driving manager effectiveness, at big picture level, Carol, what's your immediate reaction to this topic? Why did you agree to join us today?
A great question. I think it's a topic that's on all of our minds, something that's really been heightened especially since COVID and everything going on in the world. And I think it's really important that we all kind of come together and actually share what we're all doing, and we can learn from each other and kind of uplift each other and help each other through this.
And David, do you have what's your immediate reaction? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and just to follow along with what Carol said, we have been singularly focused on how to support our employees, but more specifically on our managers and how to empower them to be better leaders in this environment.
Awesome. Well, I'm ready to jump in. How about you guys? Should we do this?
Yeah, ready. Let's do it.
All right. So we always start with a macro trend. This is an interesting statement. When the economy is faced with a downturn, I think it's intuitive as a manager to focus on like the standard playbook, exercising good judgment, expense management, prudent decision making, tight execution. But needing to manage with the heart as well. The former items are really the aspects of the head, and it's easy for me to relate to those things. But when we talk about leaders having to manage using the heart like never before, that's an interesting thought. What are your initial reactions to this statement, Carol?
Yeah, what's interesting is one of our values, actually our first value at Abrigo, is love for others. It's about elevating each other up and leading with the heart and really understanding what people are going through. And I think that definitely rings true right now, more so than ever. It's also to remember to lead with your heart. And, your companies are always wanting to hit their targets and their goals, but really making sure that your employees are coming along with you. So for instance, when you take a look at our team, my team, along with David, is on that team. We have a variety of individuals that have, young kids that are daycare age up to kids that are in school. My kids are graduating and leaving, up to people that are also caring for, maybe their parents that are becoming elderly and they need extra care. So we know the dynamic on our team is very different right now. And so we also need to remember that's very different across the organization.
David, anything to add?
Yeah,
The heart?
And I agree. I mean, I think that we have found that it's even more important to be aware of how people around us are being impacted by things. And for some people, it's something new to them to be able to learn those things about the people they're working with, the team members they have. And I actually think, thinking more about, I think it's even more, we talk about empathy and grace. I think it's really important for us to extend some empathy and patience and grace with our managers too, because they are having to lead team members and they're experiencing their own challenges at the same time. And so having to lead people and experiencing these challenges at the same time is very difficult.
It is very difficult. It's like, these are truly unprecedented times. And, I'm curious, are there any examples specific to Abrigo where, you've seen these principles kind of exemplified by leaders, or anything to share there?
Yeah, actually, we have a situation in one area where we have an employee that he works 8 to 5 because he helps our customers on a daily basis. His wife also works full time too. They have a brand new baby, about 3 months old. As you all are aware, daycares were closed or still closed, majority of them. And he was struggling to get his job done, and it was very stressful because they were both trying to juggle watching the baby and do their job and do really well at their job. So their manager knew him well enough to understand something wasn't working well, came to us, we all put our heads together, and now he's kind of swapped roles with somebody else on the team. So he can do a really good job, learn some new skills. This other employee is super excited. They're learning new skills, but they can handle a lot of the 8 to 5.
So
and it's worked out really well.
This is a completely new job that he was kind of pivoted into?
Yeah, they've for a while. It's temporary just to help each other out. But the nice thing is they were both willing to do it. They were both able to learn new skills along the way. And he's actually been able to, his work-life balance has been improved. And so less stress on his entire family, which is also less stress on the entire team, because that does roll over. It doesn't just stay. So it's worked out really well. And it's fortunate that we could all come together and be creative. I think that's all about being creative, knowing your employees' personal dynamics well enough, not digging too far, but knowing well enough what's going on so you can make an effort and make some changes and help them lead through this crazy time.
And David, you were telling me about a program that your CEO instituted for managers regarding, a week off. Can you share that with the audience about?
Yeah, and I think that was something that we were talking about, and Carol, you can add to this, but just giving managers a week off from meetings once a month so that they had time to focus on just getting some of the work done and removing some of that noise and distraction. Mm-hmm. Working remotely, there's a lot of meetings like this and throughout the week, and so it gives them that break to be able to spend time actually focusing on getting some of the work done that otherwise might be challenging because they're trying to dance around different Zoom meetings and things like that.
Yeah, that feels like a scary thing. We have weekly managerial cadences, and I can't imagine. That's a pretty bold move to just give all managers, a week for free so they can from those meetings so they can have some more time to spend with their teams. I think that's an amazing program. And so, my next question. Do you think that managers are equipped to tap into both the head and the heart when doing their jobs?
I think for us, it varies by manager. Some managers have responded more quickly and easily, and others have not. And we've noticed that. And I think I mentioned empathy earlier. Empathy comes more naturally to some managers and leaders than others. And so we're finding that that is a challenge. But so we're trying to address that with some of the programs and things that we have in place. And I think that's the big thing that we've noticed is that some are prepared, but others still need those tools and the guidance and the reminders about some kind of best practices around managing, especially remote teams. We are almost 100% remote working right now at our company.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I don't even know that I know that there's a need like this. This in the earlier phases of my career was a bit of a blind spot for me. And so I can, particularly in this environment, see how that could be the case for a lot of managers.
Yeah.
As far as the managerial tools at Abrigo, do you feel like your managers are well equipped or were well equipped, excuse me, to manage using the head and the heart?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had actually, Carol and I had started building out some resources over the last year and a half in the time that we've been here, building out fundamental manager training and rolling that out and making manager resources available. So we've done some pre-work, but what we found that as, with COVID-19 and us having to all go into a remote working environment, so we had to spin up some resources to make them more readily available and let our managers know. And so we've had to curate a lot of the content and make it available. We have a manager resources site within our intranet on our SharePoint site that has a lot of resources that we have gone through and provided to our managers to help guide them. There's a lot of great research. There's a ton of information out there. HBR, Harvard Business Review comes to mind, some others, LinkedIn Learning, others that are providing free access to a lot of their tools. And we've collected those and pointed our managers to some of the best ones that will help them take actionable change right now.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like there are a lot of things available. Like I don't know about you guys, but I found it somewhat overwhelming as we really got deeper and deeper into kind of remote working, just the accessibility, the availability, the number of email. Like, was that a challenge at all? And I guess, how did you help the organization?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. I think we kind of laugh, and I'm sure people on the phone will say the same thing. You get so many emails every day. You're like, at the point, you're just like, I'm just ready to delete them all. And so David's right, really helping on our managers by, kind of distilling down the most important things, the most relevant things that they can use. And I definitely want to give David and his team credit. They were so creative when we went to remote working, coming up with what we call bite-sized information to give to managers, to really give them, something that they can read in 15, 20 minutes. You're not keeping them, at an hour at a time. We call them manager minutes. And so really providing that to managers so they can learn. So, one of the topics was leading from a distance. Majority of these managers, this is maybe their first time managing, and they've never managed a remote employee. So that's brand new for them, really communicating in a remote environment and how that's different. Like the tone you're using when you're using instant messaging, the urgency of your instant message. What time are you actually sending that? Should they be sitting at their desk still or be with their family or doing what they need to do in the evening? And really explaining the why. Why are we doing this project? Why are we working on this? Why do I have this need? This team has been wonderful in really stopping and thinking about what are the creative ways we can give managers good information, but not overwhelm them with everything else they have going on too.
What a great support. Can you guys add me to the distribution for the manager?
Yeah.
We could.
Next question. So how and when did it become clear that there were challenges for managers? What were the warning signals that you needed to better support? You needed to provide some tools to give more support.
Yeah, one thing that we did, and we use Workify, as you mentioned, about a month after we went working remote, we actually ran a survey, a company-wide survey, just to get feedback on how people were feeling, another lens on what's been going on. You started working from home, that was new, but you've been in it for about a month. How did that feel? And so what we really got from the survey was a lot around communication and on their managers. So they said, please keep doing company-wide meetings on video, so they could see faces and see our CEO, see our president, get live kind of updates. Our president actually went and started making weekly video chats. And so he interviews somebody in the company, how they're doing, what their team's doing, what they've been working on. And it's just another, way to understand what the company's doing and how they're doing it. And it's fun to see because you can see them on the video. And then, as you know, one thing that always comes out of the surveys is around communication. So we did change our communication plan and put together monthly meetings for our senior leaders and our other leaders. So anybody that's a team lead on up that's managing, and it's really, we've nicknamed it Ask Me Anything. So it's an Ask Me Anything monthly meeting with our CEO, executive management team, kind of giving updates on what we're doing for the month, what's coming up, and just you can ask anything, and that's your time to ask anything, so you can help lead your team better which I thought it's worked really well so far.
What a great idea. Have you guys found, what sort of Q&A? Are those pretty active conversations in your AMAs with your leaders? Are people asking questions?
I would say, yeah. I mean, we have pretty good discussion along with those, and it also highlights some of the clarification that's needed too from a manager level before they start sharing that information among their teams, so that everything is consistent from the executive level, manager level, down to the individual contributor. I think that's one of the biggest impacts, positive impacts we've seen, is that communication is more consistent and accurate across the business.
Wow. That's great. That's great. And maybe in this case, having this, as a remote working process, it may actually make it easier for people to ask questions. I know sometimes there's hesitation. Well, this is a great conversation, but we do have more that we need to get to. So let's move on to the next discussion point. This is another great question. How do manager effectiveness? It almost assumes that is the same thing today that it was before. And I guess the question to me is, like, how do you redefine what an effective manager is, given all the changes that are going on? Can we apply all the historical measurements? Is it performance? Is it competencies? Are there new things? And so my first question here for you all is, how did you think about this at Abrigo? Was there a redefinition of sorts of what it means to be an effective manager?
That's a great question. Our outcomes are still the same. Our goals are still the same. What we're trying to do for the year has not changed. And so we did, as a company, had to shift temporarily. We were fortunate enough to be able to help with the PPP and the SBA loans. And so that changed our outcome a little bit. But really, I think one thing that really changed, and one thing we're having to think about really, is how to navigate employees in their personal lives and what's going on also while they're working, and as we talked about earlier, kind of in their personal lives, and how do we adapt? It's all about adapting, change management, and it's like empathy, truly, but you're using it maybe a little bit more than you're used to using it, or you're having to flex that muscle a little bit more than what you're used to. I think that's one thing that we're focusing on.
And did you identify any new elements that needed to be added to how you're measuring your managers?
I think that the survey that Carol mentioned before, I think that there are some areas there, some of the questions there, because one of the things that we're able to see is a heat map of how employees respond in different departments by manager and things like that. So we can see some opportunity areas, areas where around communication and being supported by managers, where some managers have higher scores and some may have lower scores. And that is a true metric we can start to now track over time. So the next time we run a survey like this, we can see if there's any movement one way or the other across the business and among managers.
Yeah, the two questions, like David mentioned, we really asked about managers are, I feel supported by my manager, and I feel safe asking my manager questions. So being able to do that through Workify and get that scoring and sharing with that manager gives them another lens. It's just another way for them to see how their employees are doing, and if they're doing really well or if they're struggling a little bit. And it really gave them some really good insight. And some of the managers actually changed how they were holding their meetings or how they were communicating with their employees based on those scores.
So if I understand correctly, you guys you took the data and you met with managers individually, where there was a need, you met with them, reviewed the results, and put together from there. Awesome.
Yeah, we definitely did. And we met with everybody, but definitely worked together to put a plan in place to kind of help them and strengthen that and get their group, on the right path, so to speak.
And so, that seems like a great top-down approach. What are you doing from a bottoms up in terms of the more formal? Are you guys conducting a more formal feedback process that you would typically see under normal circumstances?
Yeah, we are actually just getting ready to kick off our what we call our start, stop, continue review process, which is a twice a year review process. Not like a very formal performance review, but it's a twice a year process where every employee throughout the company, from the executive level down, to the individual contributor, fills out a form and to document things they want to start doing, the things they want to stop doing, and things they want to continue doing. And that is a period in time where we're asking every employee to pause and think and reflect back on the last 6 months on all the things that they've wanted to achieve, the things that they've been working on, the things they've been doing well, and what they want to start working on moving forward. And they also do goal setting at this time too. So it's very intentional. And so it's a 2-week process for the employees to fill out the form, and they have enough weeks to meet with their managers one-on-one virtually right now to discuss that feedback. So managers will all give feedback on every employee across the business.
Wow. And that's all being coordinated virtually through virtual one-on-ones in terms of the actual delivery. Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Then my next question, and it kind of relates to it because I think it's really an output. So once you get feedback, you've gotten feedback now at a high level from a top-down approach. You're about to get some bottoms up. What did the process look like for you guys in terms of redesigning the manager toolkit and any training programs? What have you put into place, and how did you get there?
Can we take that, Carol?
Yeah, go ahead. You're the one that designed it all.
Yeah.
So.
So another thing we're kicking off this month is some training for our managers, all of our managers, that will be covering change management and empathy, those 2 areas. And they're interconnected in many ways, but we had actually started developing this training early this year before COVID-19 hit, and we were going to roll it out in the springtime, and then all of this happened. And the training was just lucky for us that we were developing it, but we did find that, we had these assets that we were going to deliver, but we've had to fine tune and repurpose some of it so that it's more relevant to what they're dealing with today. But we had some of that in place, and we're still working on more. That's just where we're beginning right now, to help our managers better understand, what their employees are dealing with, how they can better lead their employees through change and through times of chaos and crisis like this, but also how to practice empathy and better understanding, and even some vulnerability with their employees when they're interacting with them.
That sounds awesome. And how, sorry to keep looping back to the kind of tool set, but how are these classes? Are these all going to be virtual classes that you're giving?
That's the other thing we're having to rethink, because in the past we wanted to do it in person, have everybody in big groups together so we could all have a great group discussion and see each other face to face. So we've had to rethink that, and now we're conducting these virtually. We use Microsoft Teams internally, and so we're going to be having much smaller manager training sessions, but more of those sessions where we can do those on a more personal basis, but still allow really good group discussion in a workshop style setting.
Yeah, and David and the team have really tried to change up who's in the pod, so to speak, for the training. So people from across the entire organization, you're not being trained with the same people you're normally with. So you get to see new faces that you normally don't see. Maybe you would have seen them in the office, but now you're not seeing them so much. So really kind of changing up the different departments and the different team members in each training so they have a chance to learn from each other too.
Yeah, I love it. One of the things that historically over the last, couple of years, since our existence really, that we've seen as a challenge for companies, especially, rapidly growing companies, is collaboration, right? It's like a constant theme, teams could work more effectively together. I would like to have more interaction with other groups. And particularly right now, that's compounded even further. And I love how you guys have taken this opportunity to shake up the pods, as you said, Carol, to create that cross-departmental collaboration and team interaction. That's awesome. Well, again, I feel like we could just keep going on this topic. But there is one last kind of bigger picture question that I wanted to talk to you guys about. And so, the last discussion point, I'm a big believer in purpose-driven leadership, conscious leadership, and with Workify, we set out very early on during the current situation. We actually decided to shake up, our purpose. We always had, a purpose around providing our clients with better data to drive better decision making and better performance. The shift for us, has been simplifying things, right? And so we, really simplified our mission, particularly during this period of keeping companies connected to their people. And what that did for us is it like really simplified decision making, whether for managers, for individual contributors, and we would ask ourselves like, how are we aligning ourselves around this mission to whether it's sales and marketing or product or client success. And so I'm curious at Abrigo, and I think you've already mentioned a couple of things that jumped out to me. But how did you guys work through the COVID-19 chaos, and were there changes to your purpose or how you serve your clients? And really, how did you do you believe in this statement that this alignment will help managers better support their teams? So that's the last discussion point for today. Carol, I don't know if you have thoughts on this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our mission all along has been supporting the community banks and credit unions. And when I say community bank, I'm not talking about the Wells Fargos of the world. I'm talking about your bank down the street, the bank that your small business goes to get that loan. And so we were very fortunate enough that there was a piece in our product that we were able to build out quickly to help with the SBA loans and help these small businesses obtain those loans through the PPP program. And so we had to stop. A lot of people had to stop what they were working on and move over and help with this, but it was all hands on deck. And we, it was still our mission. We were still helping these banks. They are so thankful that we were able to get them in that process as fast as the big banks were getting in there and getting the money to get that money for those small businesses. And so it brought the company together and the employees together to see the great things that we were doing that were making an impact on these small businesses. So our mission's still the same. It changed a little bit due to what's going on. Thankfully, we were able to be part of that process and really help people. So it's so nice to see, and it really brought everybody together. Everybody's like, what can I do? I'm in HR, but what do you need me to do? Do you need me to fill out a spreadsheet? What do I need to do to help you all if you're trying to help these banks get on these loans? And so it was really nice to see everybody kind of come together. That love for others comes right back. Elevating each other, helping everybody get done what needs to get done. And so our mission's not changed. It's still that same path, helping those community banks and those credit unions, but it did change a little bit with what's going on with COVID. So it was nice to see, actually.
David, anything to add here?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that the purpose, our purpose and mission has actually come into much sharper focus for us. With all of this, Carol mentioned at the top that our mission is to help communities win. And I mean, we think about helping our communities. And that when I think of our community, of course it is those community banks, but the community employees around me, helping them win. We're always asking ourselves, how can we help them? How can we reduce the noise, reduce some of that friction that's going to keep them from doing the jobs they need to do? And it's helped people pull together and rally around this singular mission. So it's been great. That's one of the great outcomes of this for us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was the core. We did this in record time, and that's a good thing, because I believe the best part of these conversations, it's the Q&A piece. And so I have seen some questions rolling in. Particularly, get ready, David, because I think a lot of them relate to the training.
Excellent.
So the first question that I am going to and apologies to the audience, I believe there may have been some echo issues, but it looks like everything is fine now. The first question, and I guess this is for Carol. How many employees does Abrigo have, and of those employees, how many managers do you guys have?
Great question. So we have around 425 employees. The corporate office, just to let everybody know, is here in Austin, but majority of the employees, more than half of the company sits in Raleigh, North Carolina, and across the U.S. From team leads on up to the executive management, we have close to like 95 individuals that are managing in some form or fashion. Either they're brand new to managing and this is their first step into that, or people that have been managing for 20 plus years.
Okay, so now that we have that context, David, can you talk a little bit more about the empathy training and change management? Are you willing? Can you share, I guess, a little more
Sure,
about
yeah.
what's in and maybe from like an agenda and topic, but how are you
Yeah.
approaching that? I think that's something that really our audience can take something really meaningful away with.
Yeah, I'll take change management first and then follow up with the empathy part there. But the change training is, a lot of managers may be familiar with it, but we wanted to talk to them about the change curve and how people deal with change just in general, and then how it relates to in the workplace. And so we are going to be walking them through the change curve, and talking about different parts of that, and sharing some examples, but then also how different personality styles respond to change, because that's an important part of this as well, is that everybody doesn't respond to change in the same ways. And so we're actually going through that, and so that managers can better understand how to identify their team members based on who they are as individual people and how they might be responding to change, but then also how they as managers can better support those employees through that change and get through that change curve to a point of acceptance and being able to move forward, and not being stuck in a pit of despair and worry and fear. And so
how does that work? So do you like plot people on where you are on the change curve and like their
So
characteristics of like each segment of the
yes, it's a great question. And so because in the type of training, we're going to be giving a high level overview and some descriptions of what those individuals would look like, but it's up to them to take that back there and kind of get to know their teams, but using that criteria. So and in many ways, we don't want to box people into certain categories, but it allows them to identify some of the things that they could use to help individuals that demonstrate or certain characteristics, and recognize those so that they can better help them through that change.
And so this perfect dovetail to the next question. So is this a voluntary training or is it mandatory?
For managers, it's mandatory. We're requiring all managers to attend this. So those 90 some managers that Carol mentioned, they're all scheduled right now to attend one of the many sessions that we have over the next 6 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks or so.
You're going to be busy.
Yeah, we will be. Yeah.
The executive management team is all going through that too. So every CEO, our CEO will go through the training just as well as everybody else. So
yeah.
And so related to that, so then there's like the next step. Are you recommending that managers then meet with their teams to go through the exercise? Like, have you gotten that far yet? Has that been considered?
We haven't gotten that far yet. Right now we're providing guidelines, but that is definitely part that is that's a component that we could add to this as well, because like you were talking earlier, we've got to find a way to measure if this training is effective, and so it's important for us to follow up and keep reinforcing these things.
The next question, what tool, well, I guess the question should be, do you use a tool for personality change style? Do you guys use any sorts of assessments or, competency models?
I can start, and then I think Carol can probably add to that too. We've used the Clifton Strengths assessment which is formerly called Strengths Finder Assessment. People are probably more familiar with that name. That's a great tool to use, I believe, to better understand your teams, their motivations, where they're coming from, and how they like to work. We've used that in some areas around the company, but have not. We haven't rolled it out company-wide yet, but that is actually on a roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
But I recommend that one. I think that's a great tool. There's many others out there, and I know that everybody's probably got those types of tools. I've used several others like MBTI and Insights and DISC and things like that. I think they all can be used in helpful ways that would kind of inform, us about the people that we work with and ourselves, our own working styles.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Strength Finders is a great tool. It's something we're looking at on the roadmap for the back half of the year. We're already almost there, Q4 and into 2021. But you mentioned competencies, and that's one thing that we do on the front end when we're hiring for a role. When we're hiring at Abrigo, we not only look at the skills you need for the job, but what are the true competencies needed in each role. And we also, work on our values and ask values questions. So we're looking at competencies before you're walking in, and then we're helping you strengthen that with going through things like Strength Finders and all the training.
Nice. So you get ahead of that in your talent acquisition process in terms of, you know, reviewing and assessing competencies, and then carry that on with Strength Finders. I had no idea that the name of Strength Finders had changed.
Yeah. The Cliftons, Gallup decided to just rebrand it a little bit, but same assessment, same type. Yeah.
The Clifton. All right. Well, next question is, you know, what do you do with managers that resist focusing on the soft skills? This is a great question, because I do believe, in my experience, having been a person who personally has been resistant to focusing on the soft skills, I alluded this earlier in our conversation. It was a bit of a blind spot for me, and honestly, you know, my DNA is like, okay, I'm going to come in here and do what I have to do, and I'm going to crush it. And it's like, no, Stephen, you cannot run people over. You gotta, you can't operate this way. And especially with words like, you know, empathy and vulnerability, I think there can be a real frou-frou type of, you know, reaction to that. And I'm just curious, you know, how have you guys, you know, what have you experienced any managers like that? And, you know, how have you worked with that?
We see that for sure. And I mean, what I will say is that, yes, I've encountered that resistance in trainings that we've done, and people wanting to, you know, they don't buy into it. But there is so much research and study out there that's showing that the great leaders out there that we need today have to be more empathetic, need to demonstrate more vulnerability. And I'm often showing them statistics and data and things like that to help break through that, because once these leaders start seeing raw numbers, because many of them are very, very data focused, and then you start creating some awareness around how not being empathetic can have a negative impact on performance and productivity and things like that. They start to realize that maybe I need to look at myself a little more and become more aware of that. And so I think sharing that data and some of those things is helpful sometimes. It's not easy to break through those barriers sometimes. So.
Yeah, and David's, you know, definitely right on. And I think throughout our trainings, we try to give examples of different situations and how people handle it, and just really reminding managers, put yourself in somebody else's shoes for a minute. Mm-hmm. Get out of your own shoes, get in their shoes for a second, and look at it from a different angle. And we have had managers come back and say, you know, I'm not really good at emotional intelligence. I'm kind of lacking there. What resources can you give me? Is there books I can read? There's things I can do. So it's starting to take effect through all the trainings and the conversations, but really having them kind of have an open mind and looking at the big picture, not just focusing on the one thing the person's doing, like what could be causing that, you know, kind of step back a little bit. And so, but we'll always see it, and we'll keep working on it. And we've had some great actual response in regards to all the training and just helping remind people every day.
Yeah, and Stephen, if I could add,
go ahead.
One of the things I didn't get to talk about was the empathy part of the training that we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Oh.
And one of the things that we'll add, because people are probably wondering what that's going to have, but one topic's going to be like 7 tips if you're somebody that stinks at empathy. And so it'll be just some, you know, there you go, I'll send it your way. And so those are the kinds of things. We just want to give people really useful things that, hey, just like you did right now, Stephen, you were vulnerable and saying, hey, I wasn't great at this earlier, but I realized this is something I need to work on. If we can get them to at least hit that and like realize that, we can give them tools to be better, to help themselves be better.
So yeah, like the first step is being aware that this is a blind spot, right? That
exactly.
I'm aware that this is a need. Yeah. Next question, and don't worry, we are getting close to the end of the question. So, you know, this all sounds great and is very helpful. We haven't been able to make a lot of progress. We've been focused on other things. Where should I prioritize if I'm just getting started? And I think that I'm guessing this, you know, is like, you know, focusing on managers and understanding where we may need to better support.
Yeah.
I think the survey, asking the questions and listening to how people are doing is so important. Having some data to help you know what direction to head, because if you're just doing it on gut instincts right now, and not trying, and just if you know something's needed, but you're not quite sure what it is, somehow you need to get some information, whether it's through a survey or focus groups or roundtables, and start asking questions and listening to people before you can start taking action. Because that's what we had to do. And we realized pretty quickly, we need to focus on these areas.
Yeah, and one thing I know that David did when he first walked in is we kind of set a baseline for managers. What do we expect of you as a manager at Abrigo? Like, you can be the CEO, you could be a brand new manager, all the expectations are the same. So kind of setting that foundation on what do we expect of you as a manager? Like, why are one-on-ones so important? Why do we do them? What are the things we think about? And so really kind of setting a good solid foundation. Every single manager at the organization from the executive level went through that training. So we're all on the same page together. So if I'm an employee and I go from my group to maybe your group, Stephen, I know what the foundation is. We're going to have different personalities and we're going to handle things differently, but there's a good foundation there of what we expect at a company level too. That really helps a lot.
And my final question is, where do you guys see, how do you see the next 6 to 12 months playing out? There's still a lot of uncertainty, from a business standpoint, as a business leader, there's still a lot of things up in the air. And so from a people standpoint, and maybe this is a question for you first, Carol, how do you see the next 6 to 12 months playing out?
Yeah, that's, I wish I had a crystal ball. We all do, I know. But one thing actually our team talked about is, as you mentioned earlier, kids were homeschooled, and now we're getting the information back from the schools on how they're going to handle this school year. It's looking a little, scary for some of the parents, the blended model. And so we were actually talking about what can we do to help? What are some support things that we can do as a company to help? And really talked about starting in a parental ERG, an employee resource group, maybe for all these parents that are going through this. So they know other parents that are also going through this and having that support system. So trying to be creative on how can we also support them, not just as employees of the company, but as parents or as people that are struggling working from home. And one thing that also we're planning, and David can speak to this as well, is really diversity and inclusion and putting a good solid program in on D&I. We've already launched, and David and his team has already launched an unconscious bias lesson. But we're really bringing in some additional external training on that and really educating our employee base so we can, further the education of everybody, not just the managers. This education's for all the employees. And so we not just try and focus on manager training, but also all employee training as well. David, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think you said great though. I think that those other support mechanisms within the company, the employee resource groups, the diversity and inclusion training, are things that, in addition to everything else that we're trying to focus on, that those ones are really important right now to our employees. And I think around the country we're seeing that. And so we have a really big focus on developing support and training around that too.
Yeah, one of the number one questions that we have seen in the last month from a marketing perspective is like, do you guys have diversity and inclusion surveys? Or what can, there's this huge need from companies who want to get that data and launch programs. We did get one more question that popped up from the group. Are there tools for developing EQ that you recommend? And again, that may assume that you are using tools for developing EQ. So are you using them? And if you are you would you recommend anything? And if you're not using them, are you aware of any good tools out there that you recommend considering?
Yeah, we aren't using anything right now. And Carol, nothing's coming to mind for me right now. Is there anything that you can think of around tools around that? I wish I could.
I don't know of any tools, so to speak, but I do know some good resources. So I'm happy, Stephen, to send you the kind of the resources we have and we've shared with some of our managers that you're welcome to send out to the group that's on the call today. I'm happy to send you all that information. Some things that we've shared with our managers that they're going to do on kind of their own time and kind of learn more and take that upon themselves. So we found some good resources there.
Yeah. And Stephen, only the one thing that I could maybe share with the group, I mentioned Harvard Business Review earlier, and that's a great resource source to me. I would recommend people sign up to their management tip of the day email newsletter. It's I get a lot of insight from that. It's a free newsletter that they send out every day of the week. And sometimes it triggers things that I can build upon and share with managers. Sometimes I can just share that with managers, but you can go to hbr.org and go to their email newsletter page, and there's one called Management Tip of the Day. And Stephen, I can send you the link. It's just an amazing resource, a trusted resource, and really good information that I think is relevant. So.
Yeah, we're gonna have to debrief because I have requests. The rest of the list are requests for follow-up information, and guys, we're happy to share.
Yeah.
And
happy to.
It isn't kind of proprietary. In the spirit of sharing resources out there, one of the resources that has been really helpful for me and for us is the Deloitte Insights blog. That's another thing that you can subscribe to. There was one, and it's a range of topics from, how do you go in a crisis management mode from a business perspective? Like, what are the steps that you can take? All the way to, some of the topics that we're talking about. And so that's also something that you can subscribe to that we've gotten a lot of benefit. And I actually included the quote from Deloitte Insights in the materials we'll share with everyone.
Great.
I think it's time to bring this to a smooth landing and get closer to our wrap up. I guess, the last thing that I'll do is, what parting words do you have, if any? And this is an on the spot question because I didn't provide this material. What are your final, what are your recommendations? If you could boil it down to 3 things that you would recommend to the audience before we drop, what should they consider as they look at helping their managers and leaders be more effective in their jobs?
Oh, that's a hard one. And I'll say this, and my team laughs because we say this every week: patience and grace. It's going to take a lot of patience and grace. And it's a lot of times, employees all look at the HR team and why haven't you? Why can't you? Why aren't you moving faster? We need this, we need that. And it's just like, okay, hold on. This is a marathon. We're trying to do everything and educate you well and get you good resources and not just throw something at you just to say we checked the box and can move on. So making sure that we're really explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it in a certain timeline, in a certain fashion. So when we have our company meetings every month, David or I or somebody from the team gets up and really talks about what's coming up. What are we doing and what can you expect from us? And so really trying to be open and communicate and share. But I know we've been overwhelmed as a team. It's, we're part of COVID as well as everything else going on. And so it's hard for us. We have to remember to take a time for ourselves too and remember that. So just a lot of patience left for 2020, that's for sure. David, what do you have to add?
Sort of along your thoughts around, we're all overwhelmed sometimes, and sometimes I have to remind myself, and I think it's good advice, is to control the controllables, and not feel like you have to do everything, because that's not possible. And then one other thing I was thinking about today, and I didn't realize you were going to ask this question, but there's this old saying that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. And so if you haven't started something, that's okay.
Wow.
Start now.
That's great. That's great. I love that. I think that's a great place to end our session today. I want to thank both, Carol, you and David. This has been an awesome, I knew this was going to be a lot of fun, but I didn't think it would be this much fun. To the audience, we hope that this conversation has been useful in your discussions at your organizations in terms of how you can develop new tools and programs to better support your leaders, helping them drive engagement and help creating an environment that will provide, a place for teams to be more effective in their jobs. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and close the session. Thank you guys so much. It's been a great time.
Thank you very much.
It was awesome.
Wonderful. Had a great time.
Yeah, definitely. Bye.
Bye.